So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can do reprompts for user input. So what I mean by that is, let's take a scenario where we are expecting the user to type in some value like an input, and they they provide the wrong value, or in some way we can't really understand. That is, the bot is not able to understand the user's input. In that case, we want to reprompt the user for providing the input. So the typical setup for this, especially if you've been following the material on my website, what you will usually do is, let's get started. The default welcome intent is going to let's say hi, and let's just put hello here. And the default welcome intent is going to ask, what is your zip code? And what I'll also do is I'll add an output context called awaiting underscore zip code, and let's go ahead and save that. So till now this is just following the usual pattern, and what I'll add is one more intent which says user provides zip code, and this is the case where they do it correctly. Let's add an input context here, and once the user gives the right value, I'll say is, let's go with something like that, and I'm going to mark it as system zip code, and zip code is 053. Let's change that to zip code. Let's go ahead and save that. And in our case, what I want the agent to do after that is ask for, let's say it asks for, what is your, which city do you live in? The next question is not very important. It's just, I'm just mentioning it here to make it clear what we are going to do as our next step. So I'm going to say awaiting city. It's going to be the next input, which is expected from the user. And let's say, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens here. Let's start with hello message, and then it's going to ask for a zip code. I'm going to say 6, and then you can see that it's asking for which city do you live in. So let's reset the context and start the conversation again. And let's say that at this point the user types in some kind of a gibberish value, or it may be like a zip code from some other country, and I'm just going to make up something here. Let's say CS234. And you can see that what's happened here is, it's okay. First of all, it's gone to the default fallback. That is good. It's expected because it couldn't handle the zip code. But unfortunately, even if I were to type in the right value here, you can see that it's not able to get the value, and the reason for that is because the input context has been set, it has been unset, and that means it has no context when the user types in the correct value. So what we want to do is, we want to be able to reprompt for the value, and if the user gives the right value the second time, we want to be able to capture that and just move forward in the conversation. So what you need to do for that is, you don't create an intent, but you actually go here and you create, you do create an intent, but you don't use the blue button over here. Instead, you go for this one, the create fallback intent here, and let's call it user zip code is incorrect. Let's save that. Okay, the reason it's saying that you can't do that is because you haven't yet defined the input context, and because we already have the default fallback, if you were to save it here, it will be like one more fallback which doesn't have a context, and that's not, Dialogflow doesn't accept that. So let's make sure that we put the right context here, and now if I save it, it's at least going to accept it, and we don't have any user input, of course, because fallbacks are where we don't define user inputs. It's just going to take everything which wasn't handled, and it's going to invoke this fallback intent in that case. and now it's going to say, sorry, I didn't get that. Please enter the zip code in 5-digit format, just so that we are making it more explicit what the expected input is supposed to be. And the important thing here is you are going to make the same context as the output context also. So what's happened here is you effectively made sure that you will force the user to type in the right value, and until they do, it's not going to exit this intent. So let's see what happens here. Let's go to the intents view, and you can see that this intent has been added. And let's start with the hello. And then if the user were to type in the wrong value here, you can see that it's coming back with the response, I didn't get that. And you can also see that the context is still awaiting zip code. And if I were to give the right value this time, so you can see that it's now moved on to which city do you live in. So it's basically gone and invoked this user provides zip code intent. Now, of course, this is pretty much it when it comes to handling the reprompt, doing the reprompt. You need to create a custom fallback intent and make sure that you set the same output context as you have in your input context, and that should do the trick, provided the user is able to recover. Now you also have the scenario where, in spite of this, the user still doesn't understand the instruction, and there are also some scenarios where the user's input value might be right, but it's just the Dialogflow is not able to identify it as a system entity. And you run into a different problem in that case, where you are effectively caught in a loop and the user has no way to really come out of that loop. So the other approach you might also consider is you may want to change the output context to something like awaiting zip code 1 or something like that. And what happens here is you at least give them an option to come out of this if they have to. And here, once you do this, you have to handle the second fallback with a new intent, and you have to say user provides zip code 2, or you can use a better name just to understand what is going on. And here you might say something like awaiting zip code 1, and you will expect that they got the right value in this case, and you have to use the appropriate training phrases. And then it's going to say which city do you live in. And what happens if they make an error the second time also? You might have a special intent to handle that, and that is user zip code incorrect second time. And here, as you know, you are going to use the second zip code context, and now because they have gotten it wrong a second time, you can actually you can come out of the prompting, and you can give an appropriate message saying that, sorry, I couldn't understand. Please call support directly, or something like that. In other words, you aren't able to get the value, and the chatbot is essentially saying that, hey, I give up. I don't think that I can understand what you're saying here, but you may want to go for human help. And doing it like this, what the benefit you get is that you are giving the user a chance to recover, but if they can't, you're not boxing them in to provide the value. You give a second option for them to you give them some alternative. So let's test this. Let's say I go with 345. It's saying that it didn't understand, but you can see that the zip code context is changed to zip code 1. And I just happen to believe that this is the correct number. So let's say I do this again. So you can see what happened here is that it invoked the user zip code incorrect second time, and it's going to say, sorry, I couldn't understand. Please call support directly. So there you go. That's the way you can handle the reprompt for user input. One important thing that I would like you to notice with this video is that if you can set the input context and the output context, if you can set the lifespan of these contexts to be just 1, you get a lot of fine-grained control over how you want to design your bot. So in this case, what you did is you had to add a second custom fallback intent just in case you want to prevent the user from going into a loop. And you're able to do all these things quite easily precisely because you're using the context lifespan of 1. You can imagine that if you were to use a lifespan greater than 1, the hanging lifespan, like the extra lifespan of the context, will effectively it will start interfering with all the future intents, and it will actually become harder for you to design these kind of fallback scenarios. So that's also one more reason why I recommend people use a lifespan of 1 for all their output context. So there you go. That's how you reprompt for user input.